Hello? Am I coming through?
Yes.
All right, cool. Let me hit record. Oh, it's already being recorded. Great, all right. Okay. Any questions about material so far from the first week?
I just had a quick question.
Okay.
It's not really about material, but I was looking on the website and it didn't say there were any chapter readings. So I just wanted to make sure we were just supposed to read the 25 and 26, and then we don't have anything this week, right?
Yeah, nothing, no quiz this week.
Oh, okay, perfect.
No assigned reading. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that said, if you want a short, your choice book worth 20 points, the What is Life book goes along pretty well with what we're talking about this week. Keeping in mind that it was written by a physicist in the 1940s. And so it's kind of dense, but it's short and really awesome to see how he predicts the structure of DNA using just physical principles, and talks about what it is that actually defines life from a physical standpoint. Any other questions? Okay, well, let me share my screen. So, I want you to tell me what life is.
Growth.
The ability to perpetuate information.
Ability to reproduce.
Okay, ability to perpetuate. Is information part of that? Like perpetuate information?
Yeah, I'm just saying data because I feel like RNA could potentially be alive at a certain point, but I have no clue where that fades in to a hard line, you know?
What about the internet in that case?
It's
Okay.
a meme.
All right, I'll give you that. All right. What was the other?
Stimuli?
What's that?
React to external stimuli?
Reacts to stimuli. Okay.
Similar to that, ability to like adapt. Kind of goes on with that.
Okay.
Respiration.
Respiration.
Metabolism?
Metabolism.
Reproduce.
Reproduce. Reproduce.
Maybe accomplishes work or like can impose a will of some kind on its surroundings.
You put work in scare quotes. Is that all right? Like physics definition of work, or
Yeah, like physics definition or like colony of ants definition, I guess.
oh, okay.
Maintain homeostasis.
Homeostasis.
Sourced in the Holy Spirit?
What
I'm
source?
just kidding.
I'm writing down everything you say. In Holy Spirit.
Wouldn't it have to have DNA?
DNA. I don't know. I mean, maybe. We're trying to define life here.
I'd add, if that is one, I'd add DNA, or I would change DNA to just genetic material, because RNA is also included in that.
Okay.
Die.
Can I add one that's like not super serious? Struggling.
Well, we've got some on there already. What's another one?
Struggling.
Struggle. Okay, let's look at these and see where they break down. Growth. Okay, crystals grow. Get some super saturated salt water, drop a string in it, and watch crystals grow. Are they alive? I'm going to go with no. This is a personal opinion. Perpetuate information. What are your thoughts on that one? Does that hold up?
Well, machines can do that.
Yes. Okay.
Would biochemically perpetuate information be more accurate?
Are the
Maybe.
tools of a living organism of that living organism, or are they inert completely? Like if we found machines on Mars, we would assume that there was life, but they're not alive in any sense that we could really define.
Yeah, I mean, this is biology class, the study of life, and here we are kind of struggling to even say what life is. Perpetuate information, yeah, I mean, machines can do that, and maybe you want to argue that machines are alive, like Westworld or whatever. Artificial intelligences, are they alive if they get true singularity intelligence? But I don't even think we can really get around this by adding biochemical to it, because we can make biochemical machines. We do it quite often that perpetuate information. Reacts to stimuli. Does that work for people?
I mean,
Would you define reacting to stimuli like breaking a rock? The rock physically breaking, is it reacting to a kinetic force?
Yeah, or like a mousetrap being triggered. That's kind of reacting to stimuli.
Yeah, and if we're gonna go the artificial intelligence or machine, like those also react to hundreds of different thousands of stimuli.
Oh, for sure. You don't have to be very good at computer programming to write a short script that would react to different stimuli.
maybe aware of stimuli would be a better way to phrase that.
Awareness?
Aware of stimuli.
Oh. Okay, so is a bacterium aware?
Can't prove it.
I think you could disprove it, in other words. In science, we don't like to prove things because it's not possible, but we can disprove things. I would argue all night that bacteria are not aware of the fact that they're a bacterium or their surroundings or anything. It's just a little biochemical machine.
You could also take the example of a person who's blind and deaf and shining a light at them.
Okay, in your mad, cruel world that you live in, sure.
Morbid. I like it.
All right, so what
I
about adaptation, ability to adapt? I think we kind of got that one out of the way because computer programs can do that. Respiration and metabolism. Not all things that we consider living or will study in here do respiration. There are anaerobic organisms, so let's just get rid of that one. But metabolism, I think you might be onto something here. I'm gonna bold that and come back to it. Okay, reproduce.
Well, viruses sort of reproduce, and there's ambiguity there, right?
Yeah, I mean, they obviously are making copies of themselves somehow. They're outsourcing that work to another organism or an organism, depending on whether you think viruses are alive. But yeah, it's not a single viral particle that's brought the world to its knees this past year. It's quadrillions of them. Okay? So they're reproducing in some way. What if you're a human and you can't have babies? Are you not alive?
I think the the way we're looking at it is a bit, the way I see it is a bit off, because we're looking for things that specifically only define life, but life is such a broad category that multiple things define it. So take my Mountain Dew, for example. Yeah, it's not going to phase in. I'm holding a green Mountain Dew bottle. I could describe this Mountain Dew as green, carbonated, delicious, but those also describe multiple other objects. So when you take one thing and try to isolate what only defines this, I don't know if it's possible. I'm sure it's possible for some things, but something as broad as life, you're not going to find things that only apply to life.
You don't think so? Okay.
I'm sure there are, there are things, but
yeah, I know what you're saying, and I feel like I'm agreeing with you to at least a certain extent, but it kind of pisses me off because I don't want that to be the case, right? How do we make it to Mars and say we found life? Is that a possibility? Like, is it, you know it when you see it? Is that kind of what we're doing? Or how do you say something is dead if you can't define life as a scientist? So I think I get where you're coming from, but the implications of
this.
Would
Sorry to get all
ability to
existential
perform
on you guys.
action be a thing that would also fall under the life category?
What would? I'm sorry, you cut out
The
a bit.
ability to perform an action.
Well, I mean, then again,
Robots
a
do that.
mousetrap works for that.
Oh yeah, you're right.
We forgot like cells. We forgot that like main thing. I feel like.
All right, let's add cells here.
Right, because if you go back to the reading, one of the very first things of how cells became to be is you had just a regular lipid that, encased usually a bacteria and archaea, and they developed a separate biochemistry from that which was around it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of became the first living thing, or supposedly because it had certain properties.
What about things that have the ability to maintain homeostasis in kind of their own microenvironments?
Like what?
Cells, mammals, anything.
Okay, gotcha.
Large systems, internet. Potentially, I'm saying memes in that case, but I'm trying to make it as broad a net as possible, I guess.
Okay.
But stuff that can maintain a homeostasis and then also therefore cyanese or die in some way. Yeah, but it has to put in energy to maintain the homeostasis against entropy for it to be alive.
Okay.
It has to have that ability to upkeep.
I'm highlighting a few of these here because they're all kind of getting on the things that you guys are talking about here. An ability to, or some way to kind of segregate yourself from the environment and keep things different to some extent than the external environment, and the ability to actually use energy to get that done.
Places to move things to.
Right. Okay. Source and Holy Spirit.
Okay. My thinking on, so I'm a philosophy major and I was kind of kidding, but the thought that I just had was that, because, or quote unquote, living and non-living matter, so to speak, are both obviously sourced in nature.
Sure.
Right. It's kind of arbitrary to define where one begins and one ends in a certain way, because you could just easily define rocks as the most simple kind of life if life is just very complicated rocks. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's just like
hopefully we're trying to get away from that.
Right, wherever life comes from, its source is life is symptomatic of it. So everything to a certain extent could be considered alive if you want to think of it that way. It's just that
how do we test this particular hypothesis then? Do you have like a special camera that can capture Holy Spirit or something?
a priori Holy Spirit.
So we just assume it, therefore it's true?
No, I mean, maybe it's just to recognize that if we're like that, what we're calling life is just the point at which creation, so to speak, begins to carry some of these or all of these qualities. And there's no necessity really to be like, no, this is life. Because, I mean.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that, I know you meant this kind of as a joke, but I'm taking it seriously, and I'm thinking that it's a bit superfluous, because if we can define life with these other things we're coming up with, whatever we decide, and then just say, oh yeah, that's because of Holy Spirit, then couldn't we just leave the Holy Spirit out of it and use our definition? Okay. And what bothers me the most about this is this being a science class where we look at hypotheses and run tests and see if they match reality. There's no way to test it. And so it's not even a valid hypothesis for science. You can get away with some of this in philosophy. You really can. And there are ways of kind of making arguments that get around the necessity for experimentation, but there's no way to test if they're true, even in philosophy. And so here in biology, we're in the business of disproving bad ideas. And this one can't be disproved, so we're not even going to consider it, in essence, in this class. You could easily just say sourced in the pink unicorn that's invisible, right? Not testable. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. It's just kind of beyond the scope of science. DNA and genetic material. I feel like maybe this one, these are both just ways that we've seen life as we currently know it here on planet Earth and whatever, and they're just information. They're crazy cool molecules and they store information.
But doesn't every example of life that we currently know of contain genetic material?
Yeah.
So,
well,
and then in that reasoning alone, going back to what I said earlier, we did find something that specifically describes life.
Sort of. I mean, you know what prions are? Anybody?
Prions. I know the word, but I can't remember the definition.
Mad cow disease. What's a prion, if anyone can give me a refresher?
Isn't that something to do with like, doesn't it like attack the brain if you, no, that's something else.
Some of them do. The mad cow disease, yeah.
Isn't it just a misfolded protein?
It's a misfolded protein. And by its misfolded shape, it causes other proteins around it to misfold. It doesn't have any genetic material in it whatsoever. It's just amino acids folded up, quote unquote, wrong. And it works kind of like a crystal. If you start a crystalline shape and those crystals form on there, they'll follow the same pattern. So are prions alive? They definitely reproduce. They accomplish work. Their work is to rot your brain from the inside, I guess. Maybe
well, are they made of cells?
No. No, they're not.
And neither do they contain genetic material, so I don't know what the science community says, but I would argue that prions are not alive.
Okay.
And just rather a mutation.
Wouldn't the information of the folding, like that pattern, I mean, we could by the same right say that a crystal is alive, but a crystal is also, like, once that nucleation site happens, it's perpetuating the crystalline structure. Mm-hmm. And so, and same thing with the internet, where it's perpetuating. That ball's been caused, it's rolling down the hill at this point.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of a difference there is there.
Okay. And how about can die? This seems like the best definition of life to me. Aside from the fact that it's totally circular and meaningless. If something can die, it is alive. Great. All right, so not very helpful, but it's still the best obvious definition. And then struggle, yeah, for humans, yes. For bacterium, nah. All right, we've got some good stuff here. I'd like to point out that fire can meet almost every definition of life. It can grow, it reproduces, it reacts to its environment, moisture, temperature, the fuel source it's got. It even does respiration, oxidative respiration. It's got a form of metabolism. Okay? It can do work.
Isn't the most of the reactions in our body a combustion reaction technically anyway?
Oh yeah, literally your cells, when generating ATP, they're burning sugar. It's literally a atomic level fire happening inside your cells.
A fire is unable to self-regulate or can contain homeostasis, though.
Okay.
Homeostasis, yeah.
Yeah, and so it does fail some of these. Prions fail some of these. What we're probably talking about here, what you were getting at, I believe earlier, Hayden, is that we don't have, there's no like one definition for life. It's just this combination of things that we acknowledge as life. And so we're going to study them as biologists. Okay. The What is Life book really gets at this, and he comes down as a physicist firmly on the side of metabolism, the anti-entropy machine. That's what life is. It's the opposite of the way physics would be going without this process happening. And so he's defining life as this process of negative entropy. Okay. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Is focus in on like what it means to be a negative entropy machine. Okay. We'll note that the Earth and every organism on it is thermodynamically open. Okay. That means it can receive inputs of energy, and we depend on that. And maybe, at least usefully, we can think of life as some phenomenon, that's a hard one, whereby information directs work to reduce entropy. Maybe kind of a mouthful, and it's maybe not the right answer, but we're going to think of it along those lines and kind of see how it fits in with what we previously thought of as alive. Okay, so then we'll look at what goes into metabolism, these three things, energy, electrons, and carbon, and we'll look at some of these major groups. And then I'm going to give you just a brief, very, very brief tour of the tree of life and kind of meet a few organisms, kind of see how they fall into this negative entropy machine perspective. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully we don't get the seizure flickers again. All right. So, and now I can't see your chat box or hands raising, so just yell at me. This is the tree of life, and I hate it. What's wrong with it? What do you think I think is wrong with it? How about that? They do a pretty decent job. They're trying to show like, time in a scale along with this whole tree of life, but what's going on?
My thinking is I'm a chemist, so it kind of reminds me of the atomic nucleus definition, where it went from the orbitive one to the electron cloud version, where it has all these direct lines instead of the gradation from one species to another.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, our current model of the atomic nucleus is just probabilistic, right? Gradations of things. We're not really sure where anything is at a given time. I don't know that it would directly apply to this, because they're actually showing like events that did happen that are measurable and we've got good evidence for, um, as a function of this time scale. So maybe I misunderstood what you're saying. I think they did okay with that. It's kind of hard to read. What's the very tip of this tree? I don't know if you can read that.
Is it saying that oceans rusting is the very tip of the tree, or is that?
Oh, yeah. So
something that I
we're
just
we're
haven't
starting
heard
here, like the first or the current origin of life. Life may have originated many times, and some just died out. But like this sweeping tree kind of goes all the way out here to humans as sort of the pinnacle. This whole tree.
Oh, sorry.
Oh yeah. What?
I was just gonna say, would the problem with the tree be kind of like the first chapter of the Ancestor's Tale, where a lot of people think evolution is just going towards the goal of humans when it's actually not?
Yeah, I've got that problem with this particular tree is that it does reinforce that really misguided belief that like humans are the ultimate goal of evolution. It also vastly outstates the importance of eukaryotes. This whole tree is eukaryotes, and then over here is like bacteria and archaea. Well, that's not the reality. This is more. This is the best tree I could find. It happens to be in French, but you'll get the idea. This is bacteria. These are archaea, and then this little tip right here are the eukaryotes. This does a much better job of showing the relative abundance and diversity of these different groups. Life on Earth is almost entirely bacterial. Okay. Eukaryotes, way out here, animals don't even get their own branch. They're so insignificant when you're looking at the biochemical and genetic diversity of life. Okay. We're going to take a tour of this and kind of just see some things, how they metabolize, what they're doing. But first, let's take a look at metabolism. Okay. These are just biochemical reactions that build biomass, generate energy. Okay. It's the sum total of all your biochemical reactions. Okay. What goes into it? Well, you got to have energy, you got to have electrons, and you got to have carbon. As far as we know, this could have shown up on our life list also. Carbon is really the perfect element for doing the sorts of things that we require in our definition of life. And so every example we do know uses carbon. Silicon maybe could work. Interesting experiments going there. But again, energy, electrons, and carbon. Okay, and you all probably remember this a bit from 1610, talking about metabolism. But you know, these reactions going on can be exergonic or endergonic, whether they're yielding energy or consuming energy. Okay. So we can break down metabolism into two parts. Right? Think about you, the human. What does metabolism mean for your body? Describe the process.
I'd say it's the rate at which it can use stored energy.
Where'd you get that energy?
Food.
Okay, so you eat some food, and then what happens to that food?
Well, it's broken down into smaller macromolecules.
Okay, so you break it down. Breaking it down releases some energy, and since we do respiration, we're basically moving an electron off of that sugar molecule way out to the end onto an oxygen that's pulling that electron away. So it can drive this big gradient, and it's basically like a little turbine engine. Okay, so we eat some food, we break it down to get electrons off of it, releasing energy, and what do we do with that energy?
Well, we can store it. I mean, like you were saying, or we can use it to do work.
Okay, so our cells can actually use that energy to do stuff.
Push back against the entropy.
Yeah, to push back against the entropy, to instigate biochemical reactions that otherwise are very unlikely to happen, that put entropy at bay. So we can directly use that energy, but you also said we could store it. What's storing it look like?
I mean, I think there's lots of different ways to store it, but like there's like lipids, we can store it as that, or I think as proteins, and I don't know, just there's, I mean, I'm sure there's more that I'm missing, but
yeah, but you're absolutely right. We're making other molecules, right? So those molecules are unlikely to just spontaneously generate in a random universe. But if we apply work, we can spend that energy to get stuff done, or we can spend that energy to put back into a molecule, basically. Okay, so we take that energy and use it to put a molecule in place. This is why if you eat 10 pizzas a day, you get fat. You're building biomass. Okay, you've got more energy than you need to expend, and so you store a bunch of leftover energy. So metabolism, we can break down into the reactions that create energy and the reactions that use energy. That's metabolism is both of those. The first part is catabolism, and this is taking a big molecule, smashing it open to get the energy stored in that molecule. Okay, so we're releasing energy, catabolism. Easy to remember because cat and cats destroy things. Okay, so catabolism, you're breaking the molecule, you're getting energy off of it. Okay. The second part, anabolism. So you're taking some of that energy and you're using it to build big carbon chains and such. Okay. So we've got our energy source here in catabolism. So this is like a sugar molecule. We're getting some metabolic products, we're getting some energy, and we're losing some heat. This drives our little combustion chain, and we can build bigger molecules that we didn't have before. So we're taking carbon sources, smashing them open to get the energy so that we can build biomass. Okay. I would be remiss to not talk about this little thing here off to the left, the arrow pointing to heat. What's that about?
heat is released as part of like catabolism sort of thing because it's kind of like I guess it's chemical or stored chemical energy, but then it's released and then it's kind of like kinetic energy, or it's more kinetic. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's actually a law in place in thermodynamics. Oh, I believe it's one of the thermodynamic laws, but in every chemical reaction, you're bound to lose some of the energy through heat.
This is thermodynamic law 2, which basically says that no reaction or process is 100% efficient. Okay, so ideally, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have this. We would be able to use all the energy from this to make metabolic products and to build biopolymers. But we're not completely efficient. So cars, what's the efficiency of a combustion engine? How much of the stored energy in gasoline are they able to translate into moving you forward?
20%?
Yeah, it's about 20 to 30, depending on the design. Not super efficient.
Have we found anything that's completely efficient?
Nope. And we never will, because of the law of entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. It's just not going to happen in the universe as we know it. Nothing's going to be 100% efficient. Metabolism, depending on who you are, can be pretty efficient. We're not losing tons of heat, but we're still talking like at a max 75% efficient. We're losing heat. Okay. This heat is just lost energy, didn't get used trying to turn our carbon source into new carbon sources or metabolic products. Okay. So keep that in mind. The second law of thermodynamics is going to be at play here. That's what we're talking about. It's entropy. We are fighting against that. All right. Now, this is probably the most memorizing part of the entire class. It's not too hard, and you can have a cheat sheet on the exam, so I don't care. But remember, we're looking at these three things: energy, electrons, and carbon. And every organism does some sort of metabolic thing, okay? Because this is how we're creating order out of disorder. That's the opposite of entropy. We're using some information to do work to create homeostasis or stave off entropy, however you want to define that. To do it, we do have to have energy. So energy has to come into the system. If we don't have constant inputs of energy, we die. Okay, so we can no longer fight off entropy, and we're not considered alive anymore. So we can split up all these major life groups kind of by how they do metabolism, in other words. So we look at the source of energy, chemotrophs versus phototrophs. Okay. The organisms there on the left, are they
I don't think you're sharing your screen anymore.
Am I not?
No.
What? Let me get back to it. Have I not been sharing this whole time?
No, just for the past minute. It's on now.
Okay. I'll just leave it up like this. I won't do the full presentation mode. All right. So organism on the left here. Chemo or phototroph?
Chemo?
Yeah, chemotroph. Phototrophs use solar energy. Chemotrophs use other forms. Okay. How about the bear?
Chemo.
Chemo. And then the fern?
Or photo.
Photo. All right, so we can split up. We're dividing life into two big groups here. Where you get your energy from? Is it from sunlight or something else?
And we mean immediately, right? We don't mean over the course of the whole food chain, because the bear in some sense gets it from the sun too, because the fish ate something, which ate something, which ate something, which got it from the sun.
But yeah, the bear itself is immediately getting it from the fish. Yeah. All right. Then reducing power. This is like me saying electrons, because they're reducing. Okay. You can be an organotroph or a lithotroph. All right. So do you get your electrons? You eat some food or whatever. Where are you getting your electrons from? Is it an organic molecule or an inorganic molecule? Okay, so an example of inorganic is water. There's no carbon in that molecule, so we call it inorganic. Anyone know this reaction?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So we define something as organic as if it has carbon in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Almost always, and I hate to tell you that there will be an exception today, because biologists just got to be dumb about chemistry sometimes. All right, so how about humans? Where do we get our electrons? For the
Organic
electron
material.
transport chain. Yeah, organic material. So we're getting it from our organic material that we eat, okay? A plant gets its electrons from water. So sunlight energy splits open water, and we get oxygen, some hydrogen, and some electrons. That's photosynthesis right there. Okay. So a plant, we could say, is a phototroph. Okay. but we also say that it's a lithotroph. Put them together, and we've got a photolithotroph. Isn't that fun? Okay. And then carbon. And this is where I'm going to mess with you on the whole, what is an organic molecule? Autotrophs get their carbon from inorganic mineralized carbon sources. Okay. So CO2 basically is what we're going to be talking about in this class. So if you're getting your carbon from CO2 versus if you're getting your carbon from any other source. Okay. So a plant, what are they in terms of their major metabolic group? They're phototroph, right? They're a lithotroph, and are they auto or heterotroph?
Autotroph.
Autotroph. They're getting a tree gets its biomass from the air. It's not from the soil or anything. So yeah, it's CO2. And so a plant is a photolithoautotroph. Okay. This here is the cheat sheet. Okay, so where are you getting your energy? Where are you getting your electrons? Where are you getting your carbon? Okay, so sunlight, organic, then you're a organo, heterotroph. That's a weird thing to be. You got to use sunlight for energy, but you still have to eat food, not air, all right? Not many things are that.
Would
Okay.
diatoms fall into that category?
They actually get their carbon from CO2 also.
Okay.
Yeah. So they would be a photolitho auto. So bacteria, green algae, plants, the things that we traditionally think of as green stuff photosynthesizing are photolitho auto. Okay.
I have a random question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible for something to be a heterotroph and an autotroph?
Yes.
Cool.
Definitely. Okay. So let's take a look. Here's our little simplified tree of life. We're just gonna I chose some random stuff, and we're just gonna kind of zoom in on these and get to meet some things. I just realized we have 3 minutes left, so maybe I should turn it over to questions instead, and we'll pick up here on Friday. Do note that we've got another bioinformatics faculty candidate today at noon. The link is on our Teams if you want to join us and write it up for bonus points. This is a chance for you to help pick the next faculty member to join UVU. You're the ones going to have to take classes with them, not me, so I want to hear from you. So we'll pick up here on Friday and do our tour of the Tree of Life. But what questions do you have for me about material or anything else?
I have a question.
Okay.
The quiz on Monday, is that going to be on the chapters like 25, 26, or 22 and 23?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember, and I don't want to give you the wrong answer. 22 and 23.
It's on the website, though.
Yep.
Thank you.
What was the definition for autotroph and heterotroph again?
Autotrophs get their carbon from CO2.
Okay.
There's some other things they can get their carbon from, but we won't get into that in this class. It's a safe bet to say if it's not getting its carbon from CO2, then it's a heterotroph.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, this was more of a comment than like a question, but I was just thinking about, like, you were saying that defining something as alive by its ability to die. I mean, I would argue that dying is more like ceasing metabolic activity and like all the other kind of functions. But I guess that would mean that would Like it's more related to the other things, but
Yeah, I mean, my problem with saying if it can die, it's alive, is that we don't know what dying is unless we first define life. But you're right. If you stop metabolism, what happens?
you die.
Sure, but in like physics sense, entropy starts winning.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and for us that means in colloquial terms, you die. And so that's why we're kind of focusing on the metabolic and homeostasis aspects of life. It's because they're easy to work with, and they seem to actually get us the answers that make sense.
Could you briefly elaborate, actually, on that note, why you think that bacteria aren't aware?
They don't have brains.
Just on that basis?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do know that there are things you can do to a person that stops them from being aware, right? You hit them in the head, okay? You can be unconscious. Like there are minimum requirements for self-awareness that relate to complexity of like feedback loops and stuff. Second Sight by Edelman is probably the book you'd want to look into about this. Man, it's probably written in 1995, 96, Edelman. Looking at how we can actually test what produces consciousness, or at least what shuts down consciousness. And by that, we can kind of like see what may or may not happen. Maybe ants are aware. They don't have much of a brain.
Bacteria not being conscious. What about like something like slime mold? Oh, sorry.
Like a slime mold?
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, slime molds don't. They look like they have, connected activity and feedback and all that kind of stuff, but it's still nowhere approaching the complexity of like the brain of a sea slug. They can solve problems. They can solve mazes, but it's.
So can ants.
Yeah, they're not getting there.
And there are microorganisms too that don't have brains, right? Like jellyfish and corals and things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you think they probably aren't aware as well on the same basis?
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think a coral is at all self-aware. I mean, we're getting beyond my depth here. We're talking about the nature of consciousness. So I think neuroscience classes are where you're going to get a better in-depth dive into kind of what creates that.
On a different note, so if life is defined as anything that decreases entropy or negative entropy, couldn't machines also fall within that category? I mean, there's plenty of machines out there that purely are to organize.
Yeah, but they're not
level.
Okay. So they're not doing that through metabolism in the same sense. They don't like maintain homeostasis. They can't reproduce. And so, yes, they're doing some of that negative entropy for a little while. As long as you keep feeding energy into it, it can use that energy to fight off entropy. But they're not doing some of the other stuff that we're requiring living things to do, like reproduce, pass on information. And one that we didn't cover, but I really wish somebody had mentioned, is evolve. That's maybe you try to get that with adapt, but adapt isn't quite the same as evolve.
Also, are lichens lithotrophs, or would they be?
Make a machine exist.
You got to bring
material.
Okay. Lichens aren't one organism. They're 2 or 3 organisms, and different parts of them are doing different things. So we've got a green thing in there, the algal cells. Those are photolithoautotrophs. And then we've got the fungal partner, which is a chemo-organoheterotroph. And together, they make what we call a lichen. But it's actually 2 separate organisms, 2 separate genomes, all that good stuff. They can also live independently from each other. So lichens are just weird. All right. Well, I'm going to run, and hopefully I'll see some of you over in the bioinformatics teaching demo. All right.
Hey, Professor, I just had one
Yep.
quick question.
Mhm.
I haven't gotten my textbook yet. Are the chapters going to be posted onto the website?
Just the first week's chapters.
Okay.
So the
what should I do then?
chapters 25 and 26 I posted, but for 22 and 23,
Hunter, you can
Maybe-
reach out to me and I can
Yeah.
give you a copy of the next chapter so you get your book.
yeah.
Okay. Thank
My
you.
worry is that, it's an expensive textbook. If I post everything online, they will sue me. Absolutely. Copyright infringement. So, all right. See you next week.
Thank you.